we can all see it's not the same. Well, maybe not all of us. I'm Glenn Naughton with JetNation.com. Be sure to log on to JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. Of course, Jet fans still talking, reeling, arguing about last night's 30-10 loss. Want to cover a little more of it today because A, had an opportunity to watch it again. B, some really good observations from the Jets beat. A couple of really good nuggets from a couple of different writers and also Bart Scott on their post game, which I don't usually watch. Not because I don't like, I just don't have the time. I watch the game. I do a couple articles. I try to do a video. I keep up with Twitter, so I just don't have the time. But the Jets post game popped up on my YouTube recommended videos last night, so I threw that on. Bart made some really good points. Bart and Willie Colon. Um, so first of all, what I opened up with there was to me the most important thing. Um, it wasn't the same. We can all see it. So where's that coming from? Not me. Zach Rosenblatt of The Athletic reported that after the game, five offensive players approached Zach Wilson to offer him words of encouragement. Garrett Wilson put his arm around them, had some words with him, and Tyler Conklin, unsolicited, not asked, Tyler Conklin just shouted out, "It's not the same. We can all see it." So what he's talking about is Zach Wilson's play. Because, again, despite the countless fans who don't see it or don't want to acknowledge it, Zach did some good things yesterday, and Zach has been doing some good things since camp opened. And I know, oh, but Glenn, it's his teammates. Of course, his teammates are going to say stuff. They're going to compliment him. This wasn't at the podium. This wasn't Tyler Conklin meeting with the media and giving a canned answer that yes, we think Zach looks better, and no. This was Tyler Conklin on his own shouting out to make sure people could hear it that it's not the same and we can see it. Big and look at contrast it to last season, right? What was Garrett Wilson saying? This shit ain't good enough. We got to do better than this. We're a better team than this. Like guys could see last year that Zach Wilson was a mess. And a lot of what was going wrong last year was Zach Wilson's fault. And I said it at the time, and some people didn't like that. I mean, no matter which stance you take on Zach Wilson, somebody's going to get upset. But if your stance hasn't changed, then you're just refusing to see what's happening. And the same goes for people last year who were saying he was good. They were lying to themselves. And I told them that. And I was said it a million times. I was a big time Zach guy coming out of BYU. Loved him, loved the pick, wanted him. He's the guy that I wanted the Jets to grab. But when he was playing poorly, rather than say, rather than defend his poor play because I wanted him, I was like, wow, this guy's really bad right now. They got to do something about this. And a bunch of fans jumped on me. They're winning. They're 5-1. They're 5-2. Blah 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 blah. Completely ignoring the fact that it was the running game and defense carrying Zach Wilson. He was doing nothing special. Fast forward to this year, and I'm just calling it like I see it, and it's like, oh, he's getting better. And almost universally. I mean, most people saying he hasn't gotten better, it's angry fans. It's not players, it's not the media types who watch this team, whether it's the beat writers or the national folks. Universally, I don't think I've heard anyone say he didn't get better. With the exception of some fans. And he has. Again, like it or not, he has. Last night, as I said, if you wanna worry about three garbage time interceptions down by 20 in the fourth quarter, you go right ahead. You lose all the sleep you want over, 30-10 interceptions with 3 minutes to go in the game. Have at it. But the fact of the matter is, and this was the other nugget that I wanted to bring up, and I mentioned it last night when I did the post game, the post game recap, but a little more detail today from Rich Cimini. Rich Cimini of ESPN New York, who tweeted out late in the game. The number may have changed somewhat, but late fourth quarter, he tweeted out the Jets' offensive line was allowing 69% pressure rate. So here it is, player by player, and this is per ESPN pass block win rate. Excuse me, GPS tracking. Out of 54 qualified offensive tackles in week 2, Mekhi Becton 75% pass block win rate, good for 47th. Dwayne Brown, 54%, good for 54th, dead last. At guard, Elijah Vera Tucker, 88% win rate. That's good for 36th out of 54. Laken Tomlinson, 84% win rate. Good enough for 45th out of 54. Sorry, out of 56. Vera Tucker was 36 out of 56, and Tomlinson was 45 out of 56. And last and least, Connor McGovern, 79% win rate, 27th of 27. So the Jets literally had the worst pass blocking center in the NFL yesterday, the worst pass blocking left tackle in the NFL yesterday, a bottom 10 left guard blocking yesterday, a bottom 20 right guard, and a bottom 10 right tackle. Literally, they were anywhere from bottom 10 to worst in the NFL at every spot. And you know what I saw? And listen, I understand Twitter's a crazy place and you're going to get a lot of crazy takes, and I get that. But sometimes I have to remind myself that these are the people we're going back and forth with and arguing with and going at it. I saw someone tweet yesterday, Zach had plenty of time and didn't get the job done. Folks, I mean, if we're to the point where we're going to lie to ourselves that much to say that a guy who had a bottom 10 offensive lineman at all five of five spots, two of them were the worst in the NFL, and the other three were two were bottom 10, and what AVT was bottom 20. That was your best guy was bottom 20 in the NFL. So it was a disaster. There's no way around it, and you can say all you want, oh, you're making excuses for Zach. I don't know what you expect from any quarterback under that type of duress. As I said again yesterday, there have been times in the past where I've heard fans complain about the offensive line on this team, and oh my God, they're so bad. And look at how many pressures and hits and this they're giving up. And then you go look at the numbers, and they're kind of middle of the pack, like 17th in the NFL, 19th. Like, okay, not great, but the overreactions are crazy. There is no overreacting to this. This is as bad as it gets. Well, I mean, I guess everyone could be dead last, but in terms of what you would realistically expect in the NFL, it shouldn't get any worse than this. So, what do the Jets do from here? I mean, listen, McGovern was the guy, he was supposed to be not the best player in the group, mm, pardon me, but he was supposed to be the most reliable, right? He was supposed to be like the steady vet, not a great player, not a terrible player, kind of give you what what he can give, and eventually Joe Tippmann will take over. It might be time for Tippmann now. You can't get worse than last. Dwayne Brown, another guy, worst in the NFL at left tackle. Now, we talked extensively in the offseason about how Mekhi Becton needs to play right tackle and kind of just accept it because Dwayne Brown doesn't play any other position. But we also acknowledge there are some questions about Dwayne Brown that have to be answered, and will he take a step back as he got older and coming back from an injury? So, listen, I'm sure he'll be starting again. I'm sure the Jets will chalk it up to rust. They'll say it was other things. They'll blame it on this. They'll blame it on that. What they won't say is, yeah, we're worried this might be it for him. And for all the people who said that there was no backup plan, oh my God, that you entered the season with this guy and you had no other plan. I don't agree with that. I think Carter Warren, rookie out of Pitt, is a guy who a lot of people viewed as a potential starter. And I think the Jets were hoping that he would be a guy they could groom to eventually take over. I don't know that they wanted him in there. That he's still out, still injured. Believe he's due to come back in a couple weeks. That's something we should be getting an update on. When is Carter Warren due back? Because either moving the depth they have at tackle, not great. I think the Jets' their best move right now, if they're gonna sort of look in the mirror and say Dwayne Brown's not it, or maybe you give Dwayne Brown another start and you say, look, it was Micah Parsons. He smokes everybody. I mean, he doesn't smoke everybody like that. 54% win rate as a pass blocker is unheard of at the pro level. So maybe at some point you slide back to the left tackle and you move You plug Max Mitchell in at right tackle and see if and Lakin Tomlinson. I mean, really, the right side of the Jets O line, the two youngest and best players on this offensive line, Elijah Vera Tucker, Mekhi Becton, both playing out of position to accommodate Lakin Tomlinson and Dwayne Brown, the two worst guys on the offensive line. So really, should the Jets just flip them both? That's a big move, but I mean, obviously, these are the positions they prefer playing, and they've played extensively, so it wouldn't be a big switch there. The question then becomes, do you move Connor McGovern to right guard, where he played his first couple of years in the league, and Max Mitchell to right tackle, and plug Joe Tippmann in at center? That listen, I don't know what the Jets. We don't know what they're going to do. They might do nothing. As frustrating as it may sound, we've seen years past where this team is a disaster and the coaches will just stick with their vet guys for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and don't make any changes until it's too late. But the Jets do have some options here. We talked about how good AVT was at tackle last year. You plug AVT in at right tackle, Mekhi Becton at left tackle, Tippmann at center, McGovern at one of the guard spots, and you know sticking with Tomlinson doesn't seem like a realistic option at this point. I don't know. And I talked before the season about what did I say about the floor and the ceiling for this team? Like if these guys bounced back, they could be a really good O line. But there was no guarantee Laken Tomlinson was going to bounce back because he was just bad last year. There was no guarantee Dwayne Brown would be the same player, and no guarantee he wouldn't take a step back at his age, which he has, or at least it would appear. So some of the worst case now, listen, AVT hasn't been bad. Again, wasn't great yesterday, but nobody was great against Micah Parsons. The guy was a game wrecker. And let's listen. The Dallas defense is damn good, right? It's not like they went out against a bottom 10 unit and this happened. Now, I understand you want to be able to compete with the best, but at least, this today is a much more problematic, I guess you would say, a lot more problems to figure out if this was against a poor unit. But you had your worst day against a really good defense, and you do have some options. Again, whether it's Tippmann, whether it's getting Mitchell in it at a tackle spot, moving McGovern. There are some things the Jets can do, but will they do them? That's what remains to be seen. Because one thing they didn't do yesterday was stick with what worked in week one. And that's what was so frustrating to me. And that was the good point that Bart Scott made on the post game. And I remember this so well. I remember watching those old great games. Those old when the Ravens used to play the Titans and like Eddie George. And Eddie George would have these games where he'd have, 30 carries for 92 yards. And it was just both teams went in knowing we're facing a really good defense today. But we got to chew up some clock and we got to try to move the ball and it's going to be inches at a time. But we're going to stick with it and you would just pound it. Whereas the Jets' philosophy and a lot of teams today, it seems to be, well, if we can't get big runs every third or fourth run, we're just going to abandon the run game and we're going to stop doing it. And the Jets abandoned the run game too early. Brees Hall goes on Twitter, tweets out 4 footballs because he had 4 excuse me, because he had 4 carries. And he goes, he deletes the tweet. Sauce Gardner deletes his Twitter account. And listen, I get it. It's frustrating. People are going to trash you, but it's New York, man. And Sauce, listen, he had the drop pick, but really for the big day CD Lamb had, I saw one tweet. Oh, look what CD did to Sauce. CD didn't do anything to Sauce. Sauce had one rep against CD Lamb on a target, and he broke it up. I believe that was Samini who tweeted that out as well. So Sauce, or the secondary against CD Lamb, other than Sauce, was atrocious. And Rich Samini asked him, and this is another thing, another change the Jets maybe should consider. Should they start having their corners follow guys? Should they say, listen, DJ Reed, we like you, you're a damn good player, but Sauce is on another level. So now Sauce is just going to follow the other team's best receiver. And then, or do the Belichick thing. Have your best guy follow their second best guy and then double their best guy. Something along those lines. But the whole thing where the corners never travel and teams see that and expose it, it got exposed yesterday. And you don't think other teams are going to do that? Pardon me. Other teams are going to see that and say, look, let's go ahead and just line up our best receivers so they're matched up on Michael Carter. And that's not a knock on Michael Carter, really good player. But something's got to happen here. It can't be status quo. You can't just have teams eat you up. And look, the linebackers got beat a fair bit in coverage. I'm looking forward to watching the all 22 and looking at some, some of the metrics we can find online, see how often these guys were targeted. But we said, myself, Chris Schubert, Dylan Terraman, probably heard me with Scott Mason on Play Like a Jet, and say how the ability of the linebackers to cover is going to be a concern this year, and teams may exploit that. So I'm anxious to see again because you rewatch the game, you get the TV angle, you don't see everything. I want to see Jamie and Sherwood. I saw him out there quite a bit. Didn't see him targeted. So was he doing a nice job in coverage? Did he have that many reps in coverage? So that stuff we'll find out in the coming days. But right now, what we know is um, the Jets abandoned what worked in Week 1. Ton of 3 tight end sets. The Jets per PFF, like PFF or not, I don't think they were off base on this. PFF had the Jets as the number 1 run blocking team in the NFL Week 1. And the best run blocker in the group, Jeremy Ruckert, who had 15 reps as a run blocker. I don't think I saw him on the field more than 2 or 3 times yesterday as a run blocker. So you abandoned that. There's an article on the front page of JetNation.com right now. Check it out. Check out the forums. Log in, register, all that good stuff. But the Jets, you would almost think the Jets sat down and said, let's take a look at what worked against Buffalo and make sure we don't do any of that again. Because they didn't. Didn't see a lot of Ruckert blocking. Didn't see a lot of multiple tight end sets. Abandoned that. Abandoned Zach. Didn't help guys on the edges. Just let Micah Parsons abuse them all day. Zach Wilson, 70% pressure rate. And I see people saying Zach had plenty of time. Stop making excuses. It's crazy. It's literally crazy. If Zach Wilson, let him get a couple of games where the protection holds up and he doesn't produce, and I will be right there with anyone criticizing him. But the other question, and again, this remains to be seen. I'm not going to say a whole lot of it until we've seen the all 22. But what it looked like to me yesterday, this team and myself and Chris Schubert said this at the time, and I believe Dylan was in there on this with us. The Corey Davis retirement hurt this team a lot because outside of Garrett Wilson, what do you got at wide receiver? Alan Lazard, nice player, tall, doesn't create much separation, doesn't create. He, you know, anybody creates windows for Aaron Rodgers because Aaron Rodgers can put the ball through any window, but not everybody can do that. So when you've got a guy like Alan Lazard who doesn't create a lot of separation, wins a lot of jump balls, like I get that. Randall Cobb, how much does he have left? I get they brought him back for Aaron Rodgers, familiarity with the offense, be a mentor to the young kids. Um, but outside of Garrett Wilson, who are you throwing the ball to? Who's the guy that you can look to and say, I know that guy's going to get open? Corey Davis, they miss him. Um, I s- many times talked about the need to add a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. Didn't happen, and now the Jets are where they are. They've got an offensive line that's struggling to block, and they've got a young quarterback who they're trying to develop with really only one guy who can get open with any degree of consistency. So again, I take that back to a degree. Let's wait for the all 22 and let's see how these guys look. But I would say on the surface, from what we saw yesterday, the couple of overhead shots we got during the game, guys weren't getting a lot of separation. So under pressure, nowhere to go with the ball. These are the kind of results you're going to get. And until something changes, and maybe something will, we'll find out in the coming days, coming weeks. Are there going to be changes on the O line? Are there going to be people brought in? Do you make a deal for a receiver? I think that's something the Jets have to consider. There was talk of it happening before, but now that you're trying to give Zach Wilson something to work with, I think a move for a receiver might be appropriate. But listen, teams don't like to make a lot of deals this early in the season. We will see what happens. We will see you guys Thursday night. Myself, Dylan, Chris Schubert to go over this and more. I'm sure we'll rehash some of these topics and hopefully talking about some lineup changes. That'll do it till next time, Jets fans.